Now please welcome Ken Morse.
Thank you.
All yours.
Okay, good afternoon. Here we are at a media event, and Cisco speaking, and you'll be asking, so what does Cisco do with media? Well, probably some little-known facts in the region. Worldwide, we are the biggest provider of video infrastructure across the world in terms of powering hundreds of millions of devices for service providers delivering high-quality premium video to their consumers. So what I wanted to talk about today is digital disruption in media. Carrying on from the lunch theme, you can think of this as the appetizer, and then we've got a really juicy panel that's following up behind us with a great sommelier who's going to be giving us the right questions as we go. So let's have a look at it. What you have to look at is some of the trends that are happening out there and what we see in the marketplace when we start talking about disruption. At Cisco, we're in a rather unique position in that we're able to put probes into all of the networks that our equipment is in and be able to measure the kind of things that go on in there, the kind of traffic, and with that, be able to extrapolate from that to what we see going forward. As an example, we talked about in previous sessions here at this event the role of the cloud and virtualizing software and tasks on it. In another 3 years, 86% of all workloads will be cloud-based, whether that's in private cloud, public cloud, or a combination with hybrid. The type of devices and the sheer number of them that can actually consume video, 11 billion devices. What we've seen every year when we go through these stats is we're invariably conservative, and the numbers end up actually being higher. If I take an example in the US, there are 8 video-connected devices per household, 8. And just about every device that comes today is something that can consume that, whether that be mobile or otherwise. Another 3 years, IP traffic, 82% of all IP traffic will be video. That's a pretty staggering statistic. It's even more staggering when you realize that today only 20% of video is delivered over IP. Yeah, the rest is over satellite, over cable, over other infrastructures. So the sheer explosion of content and its availability and the ability to deliver it across multiple devices, multiple regions. We look at what's actually happening as a result of that. On the cloud piece, you've got large producers and content originators actually investing in that cloud infrastructure themselves. Disney made a large investment in MLBAM as they went forward. You look at the kind of content that's being generated now. Virtual reality content coming out of Rio Olympics, over 100 hours of VR content. And then just looking at the ability to stream content as well, over the top, as well as over traditional networks. Nearly 3.5 billion minutes of streamed content from the Rio Olympics. So there's no question about it. The video distribution, media distribution, is absolutely going through a renaissance and certainly a lot of disruptions that are in there. So if we have a look at kind of, I'll lay the groundwork for kind of the media video distribution workflow, and then in the panel we can build on top of that with other elements. Starting at the consumer. Consumer's there with one of those myriad of devices, and it's all about personalized experiences. Now we've got the ability to target devices as we move from traditional broadcast to much more unicast delivery, giving that personalized experience, giving search capabilities, and something that we'll talk about a little bit later about how it homes in on that profile that you have for the particular user, and does that keep them in a cocoon, or does it still enable them to go and see other things that might interest them as well? From a distribution point of view, if I look at an example of standing up a new TV channel, to stand up a new TV channel as a broadcaster, if we put all of the content aside for a second, just getting the infrastructure up and running typically was measured in 2 to 3 months. A lot of racking and stacking, a lot of plugging in cables. Now, with orchestrated workflows running in the cloud on virtualized environments, 30 minutes. 3 months, 30 minutes. That causes a huge disruption in terms of your operations inside your business as a broadcaster and a producer. Going back as well to the full production side as well. Historically here, a production center would have more cables going into SDI switches than you would know what to do with. It would look like a pile of spaghetti sitting there. What we're seeing now is a transition to IP, and an IP across all of these, as I'll show in a second. And what that actually does is actually simplifies the production network. It also enables content to flow seamlessly across this path as well. And so things where, typically when you're generating content, probably 98% of it ends up literally on the cutting room floor back at production. With it digitized from the very beginning, you have the ability to still leverage that with very, very rich metadata that isn't dropped at each step of the way, all the way to the consumer to give them added in-depth experiences, behind the scenes, a whole range of things that come much, much quicker, much more cost-effectively. And then acquisition, and I'm going to talk, especially here, we're seeing a tremendous change. Typically, if you look at originating sports or outside news events, there's a truck. Sitting in the truck, you open the door, there's a set of people very focused on all of the equipment that's there. As you'll see in a second, as we move to IP, that truck can literally disappear as we actually move all of that processing into the cloud. So let's have a look at that. So consumer experience, delivery to IP devices in the home, whether that's mobile, whether it's other smart TVs, things like that, absolutely happening now. IP as a video delivery means for over-the-top content, absolutely happening now. And giving people the ability to stand up new ways in delivering content, new channels that just appear overnight and are able to deliver those over there. From the production side as well, now moving to IP, getting rid of that historic SDI infrastructure, moving it to IP. What does that really do when we say moving to IP? It actually flattens the network, and it enables things to move much more quicker and much more seamlessly. You do that in connection with leveraging the cloud and virtualized workloads, and you have a recipe for disruption. Things that used to take months can take minutes. New services come in every 2 weeks rather than every 6 months. And also what it means to your staff in terms of the skill sets that they need to know. Before it was how do I set up an SDI switcher. Now it's more about being an IT professional, quite honestly, in terms of how you leverage that. Now, I have to say that none of this matters unless you have comprehensive security across all of this. I think this is probably the single largest threat in the disruption that comes. Because IP is a great flattener. It allows multiple devices to be very seamlessly connected together. But from a security perspective, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And the worrisome thing these days is the weakest link might be your connected refrigerator. That's what it might be in a few years. And it's that device that if that one gets compromised, it can work all the way back up the IP network and provide denial of service and other kinds of attacks. So Cisco puts a lot of focus around full end-to-end comprehensive security. It's about having a very, very strong threat assessment. You can't protect against everything, but you can identify very quickly when things happen and remediate incredibly quickly. One of the things that we leverage in this with our media partners is because we have, again, those probes and equipment all over the world, when we start to see the digital signatures of attacks or breaches, we're able to automatically heal across the entire network of Cisco, wherever that is, so everybody else gets to benefit from that. So just to give you an example here, I'm not going to go into the technical piece of this, but it just gives you a sense about one element of disruption. Inside our company, we've been disrupted in terms of how we build products. We used to build, pieces of hardware and ship pieces of hardware, and they had some software on them. Now we just deliver software on standardized network compute storage devices. And the way in which we've had to build that software is evolving on literally 4-year cycles, probably move into 2-year cycles as we go forward. And that gets mirrored in also how we then deliver to customers. So now we deliver every 2 weeks. So what does that disruption do when your vendors feeding into your system are delivering new capabilities every 2 weeks? How do you move with that? How do you react? How do you leverage that capability as you go forward? The other thing that I would say is when we look at the traditional cloud industry, it is actually ahead of how the media industry is leveraging those capabilities right now. Literally, I would have said by 2 generations, although by now most of it is moving very much more to cloud, but only some of the kind of front-end people are actually moving to containers right now. But it just gives you an example, again, of another disruption where a totally separate industry and technology is suddenly having ramifications across so many different types of business, with media just being one of those. So, what do you need to do to make this transition? And I think one of the biggest things that's important in this disruption is about training your people, is about making sure that you have the right skill sets, the right capabilities, because when we look at it from an underlying infrastructure perspective for media, it is changing on you overnight. I've been working in video for over 30 years. You used to be able to have a crystal ball that could look out 3 years, and you could say, I know what's pretty much going to happen over the next 3 years. I'm lucky if I can look out 6 months at this point in time, and even that's good. And so what we've been doing at Cisco is actually putting a whole media blueprint together. So what you saw on the earlier pages, that's the digital media blueprint that we use for media, and embracing that change to all IP across the environment. So where are you spending your dollars today? A lot of it should be in training your people. That's my message on that one. It's not just about equipment. It's not just about processes. When you're moving on 2-week cycles, it's a very different way of working. It's also what we're seeing now is before you would have fully justified business cases to go and do something because of the implications across the whole system. Now you can try things. You can do A/B testing. You can do a lot of things that literally opportunity cost is incredibly low. And so you can try and find out other new services, new capabilities that will actually cause disruption inside the environments. So I wanted to finish just with this one, which is to give you some sense of some of those things that are happening. So this is a traditional, again, end-to-end chain, both from an acquisition, content creation perspective, and then a media distribution and the end experience. If we start over on the far left, removing the truck. As I said, we can now move all of that video processing that before you typically had to do locally in a local production truck, up into the cloud, back into the data center that's residing at the production studio, and you literally have a camera that's an IP camera connected up over fiber, connected up over various different means. Also, as we look into the contribution side of things, it's about different forms of content that come in. We just touched on virtual reality earlier. The fact that also you have not just traditional professional content being generated by media companies and the like, each one of us is now also a professional media producer. Whether that's content that's coming out, from our phones, whether it's stuff over Facebook Live, whatever. Those are all things that can feed into this workflow. And the ability to actually pull together consistent metadata across all of this, be able to drive that into personalized experiences becomes critical. In the production side, it's the fact that we just now have all of this capability that we didn't have before. Before, it was, we'd do updates every couple of years. Now it's about getting updates out there, like I say, every 2 weeks, and being able to stand those up very, very robustly in cloud environments that allow the operators, the content providers, and everybody to just move at internet speed and not at the traditional speed that was there in the broadcasting industry. Already touched on the fact that standing up a new channel is, quite honestly, a walk in the park compared to what it used to be. can literally be stood up with content in place within 30 minutes versus multiple months. On the distribution and experience side, as we look at it, you'll see a few things. Both the ability to deliver new content formats, touched on virtual reality already, and then also when we look at how content is actually delivered and the efficiency of how it is placed over the networks, the disruption that's coming in there is just the awareness that we have of what content's being watched where, what the likelihood is of it. So we can actually position it deep in the network and actually make it very, very cost effective to deliver increased forms of new content. And then finally, and I'm sure we'll talk on this a lot more on the panel, is just what is that consumer experience? It's immersive. Are we all going to be wearing headsets? I don't think so. It's localized, so it has the ability to interact with you and where you are at a given point in time, whether that's in terms of localized to the content you're watching, in terms of being able to interact with elements of it, by stuff that you're watching, those kind of things, or whether it's related to literally geographically where you are, in terms of when you've got your mobile phone, you're walking past a store, hey, it can tell you straight away specials that are going on there, as an example. It's augmented. We already see a lot of augmented reality things starting to come together, and seeing a lot of interesting examples for that. And last but not least, it's personalized. One of the challenges in all of this is, we have the ability now to mine so much data out of the system. And if the consumer opts in and makes that private data available, then we're able to actually deliver much, much better personalized experiences as we go forward. And there's certainly some pros and some cons on that in terms of how much it focuses you in a particular way. So hopefully that's been a good appetizer for what we're going to have now as a good discussion as a panel. And so with that, I think it's panel time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.